everyone. Thank you for listening to the Keynote on Speaking Engagement. I'm Ryan Catherwood. This week, we've got a great episode in store for you. Our special guest is Meghan Buzby, and Meghan is the Director of Advocacy and Volunteer Engagement at the Association of Frontotemporal Dementia, AFTD. Frontotemporal dementia is an Alzheimer's-like disease that attacks the brain a little bit differently than Alzheimer's does. And this one's a personal one for me. My mom passed away in 2012 after a 10-year battle with frontotemporal dementia. But one of the things I've noticed as I've gotten older and approached the year where my mom was diagnosed, actually, unfortunately, in her early 50s, I have become more interested in the organization that's out there fighting the fight to help bring cures and research and the disease itself front and center to Americans and folks around the world who may not know anything about it. And it is a unique disease. And on this episode, we talk with Meghan about her approach to advocacy and volunteer engagement. And those listeners who are in higher ed will feel this sort of expanding the aperture a little bit, a conversation that includes references to shared experiences, not too terribly different from what students and alumni come to understand as part of a university community, but of course slightly different in that a shared experience for a family that's dealing with frontotemporal dementia is fundamentally not a positive thing. But as you'll hear, Meghan describes a really robust volunteer engagement program that I would describe as non-traditional, and something I think there's quite a few takeaways for advancement professionals and folks working in education that applies very much to our work. So without further ado, my guest this week is Meghan Buzby. She's the Director of Advocacy and Volunteer Engagement at the Association of Frontotemporal Dementia. Thank you so much for listening. Meghan Buzby, thank you so much for being on the Keynote podcast on speaking engagement. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Meghan, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the Keynote was because AFTD and FTD are important to me, particularly. My mom passed away back in 2012 after a long battle with FTD. And as I have aged and thought more about my mom's demise and the run-up and the challenge that we faced as a family, really could have used a community around that time of my life that I'm not sure we would have found you all at that point had we come looking, but it felt like there was really no one else to reach out to about this very unique disease that my mom was dealing with, and as caretakers and family members, how we could access a community of people that were dealing with the same thing. So, but I would imagine, Meghan, that lots of people have never heard of frontal temporal dementia, and it's not a common disease, but it may be more common than people think. I was going to ask you if you wouldn't mind just sharing a bit about FTD and a bit about the association, and then just a bit about your role too.
Absolutely. So you are correct. I would say many people still have not heard of FTD. It is a rare form of dementia, but it is the most common form of dementia under the age of 60. So it does have an earlier onset, which comes with its own unique set of challenges. It is quite different than other forms of dementia, particularly Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common form of dementia and probably the one that people are most familiar with. FTD strikes or impacts a different part of the brain than Alzheimer's. So it's your frontal cortex and your temporal lobes. And so that results in displaying different symptoms than you would if you had Alzheimer's. So Alzheimer's typically is memory, and memory can be impacted or affected with FTD, but for the most part, you will see different symptoms pertaining to language, mobility, and behavior. So there are different variants of FTD, and within that spectrum, there are different forms that exhibit different symptoms and pathology than Alzheimer's. I agree with what you said, where I think there are more people living with FTD or diagnosed with FTD than we actually are aware of. We do not have epidemiological data that shows the true prevalence of FTD. And mostly that is because there are no biomarkers, there are no tests that you can take to show that someone has FTD. It is a clinical diagnosis. So through an exam with a doctor or physician, that is how they determine whether or not someone has FTD. So
Yeah.
we say about 60,000 people in the US have FTD or diagnosed with FTD, but we do believe that is probably an underestimate.
Yeah. Recently, it's been brought to more prominence, I think, because this is the disease that Bruce Willis has, right? And when you have some famous people that deal with the disease, it's helpful, not of course for them and their families, but for the awareness and advocacy, right? That it brings. To your point, my mom was someone who began to show symptoms. She was always an impeccable dresser, and she suddenly was rumpled all the time. And she began to exhibit more childlike behaviors. It wasn't a memory loss thing. It was a sort of a trajectory that had her acting sequentially over time, much younger than she was, and it was a weird thing to witness that is jarring, and you're kind of figure out, well, what's going on here. But for you, I'd imagine you interact with volunteers and advocates for FTD. But talk a little bit about what brings someone to your world for the first time. What activates them?
Yeah, so AFTD has been around for almost 25 years now. So and I know we began from sort of humble beginnings by
Yeah,
volunteers. So volunteers started AFTD way back when. We have since grown into a much larger organization. We're around 56 employees now. And so more, and as we begin to or continue to increase awareness of FTD as well as AFTD, we do have more and more volunteers stepping up and reaching out to us to find out how they can get involved. And we primarily, I would say, most of our volunteers are care partners, caregivers. So those family members that have been personally impacted by taking care of someone that was diagnosed with FTD. But we do also have folks diagnosed with FTD, and we see more and more people with diagnosed with FTD coming forward to want to volunteer with us, which is fantastic. Yes. So I think we get a mix of people stepping forward. I would say there are some that have already been through the journey with their loved one having been diagnosed and then ultimately passing from FTD, and they've experienced a lot of gaps, I believe, in, healthcare and the system, and they come forward because they are looking to help the others that are out there that may be at the beginning of their journey, and they want to kind of better that journey for folks. And then we
yeah,
certainly have people that are newer to the journey that, have maybe their loved one has just been diagnosed with FTD, and they're looking for support. They're looking for a community, as you said earlier, and people that are going through the same thing as them. And then, of course, just wanting to help. It all comes from people really wanting to help because of something they've either been through or they're going through. And they want to get involved because they want to see how they can be part of making things better.
yeah. There's a shared experience here that is unique to FTD. It is a unique disease, and it puts unique pressures on families. But I think, a lot of the listeners of this podcast come from higher ed in the education space, where there's a shared experience around the student experience and the things that come with it. But this is a bit different, right? This is a shared experience built on a very stressful, non-joyous, unfortunate turn of events for everyone involved. If you are someone who has the biomarkers for FTD, if you are someone who's been diagnosed, if you are a family member or caretaker, but there are some similarities. Talk a little bit about how engagement in a cause like FTD might be unique.
Well, I think some of the things you just said, right? The disease itself is quite unique. It is, we always say if you've met one person with FTD, you've met one person with FTD because the way that folks experience FTD once they've been diagnosed and the experiences of their families is very different, can be very different from one person to another. Ultimately, of course, drawn together by being devastated by this disease, but the way that their journey takes place can be very different than the person, next door to them that's going through the same journey. So I think it's unique from a disease perspective. I also think one of the things that makes at least engagement within this community and the cause a little unique is that AFTD is a national organization and we are not chapter based. So we do not have chapters across the country, meaning, of course, then and that comes with its own unique set of challenges for those that are stepping up to volunteer. They can't necessarily go into a place, bricks and
Yeah.
mortar building and volunteer their time with us. It's a little different than that. We have our opportunities for volunteers have to be, you know, thought of very strategically because we don't have a presence across the country. We are based in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, and then but yet we represent, the whole nation, and we try to expand through our volunteers. So we really do rely heavily on our volunteers to help spread the word and educate folks on the ground in their own communities so that they learn, oh, there is this organization that has all these resources that can help us, as we're going through this devastating disease, which it is emotionally devastating. It is also financially devastating. So I think just there's a couple of different things that make it a little bit unique in that way, the organization being national and not having a community presence or a local presence, as well as the disease itself. It is a rare disease, as I stated earlier. So just from a numbers perspective, you're not going to see the it's not heart disease, right? So there's not, millions of people across the US coming together for one cause. So we are, I would say, small but mighty. Our volunteers really are at the heart of the organization. And while we don't have the numbers that some of the other disease areas have out there, we are building a ton of momentum as a small and mighty organization and, volunteer network.
Yeah. It's similar to, higher ed and other types of organizations that are a bit smaller. It's really hard to stand up those national chapters and build an event-based strategy. So you have to really have a digital first strategy, and an opportunity to volunteer looks different in under those constructs. Tell me a little bit about what you've learned about motivating volunteers that surprised you in your role.
Something that surprised me having been new to the FTD community is this understanding that our volunteers can be very motivated. Their life may not allow for them to volunteer with us on an ongoing basis all of the time, and it's given where they are in their journey. If they're taking care of a loved one that has been diagnosed with FTD, that can really kind of ebb and flow with their time availability, their and then what they're able to give emotionally, and certainly how much time they're able to give. So we have found that it's it is not an ongoing journey per se with volunteers with us. They may do something with us, and then we may not engage with them, or they might not engage with us for another, 6 months to a year, just given their life circumstances. So that has been, I guess, a lesson learned related to, and I hate to say it's not that they're not motivated. They are, they really want to get involved and they want to stay involved. It's just sometimes they just simply cannot. This is a
Yeah.
taxing
Well, as you
disease.
mentioned, this is a disease that tends to affect people earlier in their lives. My mom was diagnosed at age 52, and when you think about that age, you're in the prime of your career. Your partner
Mm.
is also in the prime of their career. You probably have kids in high school, right? And life is busy at that stage. To your point, now myself in my mid 40s, thinking about time, like right now, making a financial contribution to the association is an easier way for me to help than it is for me to give time. And that'll change, I expect, over the years to come. But talk a bit about how you think about the journey of becoming aware of the existence of the association, if you are someone who's looking for community, and moving them towards a state of being an advocate, someone who is actively working to create awareness, who's volunteering. How do you think about that journey?
I wouldn't say we have any sort of formal strategy or, where we have someone find us and then we kind of move them from one end to the other. We do try to be really mindful of the fact of what I just said, that this disease can take such a toll on a family. And so we will try to meet the person where they are. So if they express an interest in volunteering or getting involved with us, there's a variety of ways that they can do that, that we believe um, kind of give them some flexibility around how they engage with us and what that time commitment looks like. We do have opportunities that allow you to not even leave your home, right? And either maybe send an email to your legislator if you're into policy advocacy, or send a thank you note to a donor. So we do have some sort of lighter lift opportunities
Yeah.
for folks, social media, things they can do from their home that maybe take 5 minutes of their day. And that is a way that they can give back because they want to give back. They want to be part of the community. And then, of course, we have much bigger roles. And there is some strategy around that. We have an ambassador cohort of 29 ambassadors across the United States. And we've been very, I would say, like, it's a very selective process because it is a much larger time commitment, and we wanna ensure that it's a right fit for both sides. So there is sort of, I guess, the entry level way that someone would engage with us upon finding out that AFTD is even, existing.
Part
They
of their
would
life.
come,
Yeah.
they would say they'd like to volunteer with us. We like to give them some entry level opportunities before discussing with them, some of the bigger roles like an ambassador or a support group volunteer. So we do we do speak, and we keep our volunteer engagement team is always speaking with the volunteers and keeping in touch and keeping a pulse of what type of volunteer they might be, where their interests lie, and whether they'd be a good fit to elevate them to a more time consuming opportunity.
Well, you said you don't necessarily have a strategy of moving people from awareness to advocate, but I just heard you describe one where you have a micro volunteerism effort that brings people in to help in short bursts of time, whether it's thanking a donor or sending a letter to your congressperson or advocating for AFTD, and then moving those people into more time commitment volunteer opportunities, inclusive of your ambassador program. Do you find it difficult to make the ask? Are you doing a lot of asking for those time commitments for the people? Did I get that right? And when someone writes a letter to a donor and has been doing that for a little while or showing their interest, do you ask them to be ambassadors or ask for more of their time? Or are you asking for gifts, financial contributions too?
We don't currently solicit our volunteers for gifts outright. They would certainly receive the appeals that go out to our entire community every year. They are a part of that. We do have many volunteers that do fundraising events with us, and multiple ones. That we have certain campaigns that run each year, fundraising campaigns that folks can volunteer to participate in, and we have many returning volunteers each year that do that. And so they are financially giving back to the organization. So there's a lot of crossover with our volunteer network of those that, and what we have found is, people tend to fall into their comfort zone and what they're most comfortable doing with us. So we have folks that are out there educating healthcare providers, and that's maybe the one thing that they feel that they can really do, and they can really do it well, and so they may stick with that for many years. We do often promote our other opportunities to folks and let them know there's other ways that they could be getting involved with us. In particular, too, you see a lot of crossover with fundraising as well as advocacy, political advocacy, and then of course just our awareness volunteers, which are they're out there doing information tables at local community conferences or
Yeah.
exhibit opportunities. And then so there is a lot of crossover. We are still, I would say, because our political advocacy is still fairly new to AFTD, we're kind of working through some of those ways, strategies, if you will, that you were asking about, is how do we do a little bit more asking, a little more crossover, and eventually getting to a place where we're able to have more people giving both time and financial contributions.
Yeah. In the alumni engagement world, there are four categories of engagement: communications, experiential, volunteer, and philanthropy. And you also do a large number of experiential initiatives, webinars, and learning environments. Talk a little bit about some of the other opportunities that you have found successful, that you are thinking digitally first as a way to reach people.
Yes, we do have a lot of webinars that we offer. Some of them are specific to healthcare providers, but many are really intended for the general public to learn about the various things that we're doing here at AFTD and the different pillars. So there are 5 pillars of our mission. And so oftentimes you'll find, one of is research, advocacy, awareness, education, and support. And so our webinars sort of follow those 5 pillars. And throughout the year, we kind of all have different time slots to discuss those different areas. So the research webinars are great for folks that are part of the community really looking for more information on the clinical trials that are available and the science that is currently happening with FTD. We have advocacy webinars that try to educate our community more around political or legislative advocacy because it can be somewhat of a tough ask, I think, of folks. They hear politics and
Yeah.
sometimes you shut down
Write a
and
letter
they
to
just,
my congressperson sounds tough. Do you
yes.
provide templates? How do you how do you coach that?
Yes, we have an entire system. So we have a software platform that, based on your mailing address, will connect you directly to who your federal members of Congress are, as well as your state legislators. And so what that allows us to do is to send emails to our database of advocates and ask them to email their legislator or, whether it's federal or state, and ask that person for support of a bill, let's say. And so we will send out an email alert and also provide a template on our software system so folks can go to that system. They just basically they don't even have to edit it, but we prefer that you personalize it. So there's
Sure.
an area to edit and personalize to your story, and then just, click send and it goes off to the right offices. So it's very easy. And so I think that's it's like sometimes a misconception of people that think, advocacy can be, and I agree though, it can be intimidating. It sounds intimidating. You're sending an email to someone who's a position of power, right? And then also if we're asking you to call that office or meet with that person, it can feel like a heavy duty lift, but they are people just like us, and they actually work for us. So,
They actually are supposed to work for us.
yes.
I wanted to also pay you all a compliment because I am at the stage of my life where I need to have two things happen. One is secure long-term care coverage in case I am so unfortunate as to have, this particular disease in my future. I don't think I There's no indicator of family history of that, which is good. But I know the majority of cases are sporadic versus relational. But nonetheless, you have to be prepared because to have someone in assisted living, memory care for many, many years in this prime of life earning era is very, very expensive. And I reached out to the helpline email address and asked, hey, do you all have any resources for someone looking for insights on securing long-term care and or disability insurance or the types of things one might be thinking about to protect their family? And someone on your team who responds to those communications was extraordinarily prompt and thorough on providing me links to webinars and providing me some suggestions or other resources to look into, inclusive, hey, why don't you think about an elder care attorney, someone who's in your area that is an expert on this type of a thing. Had never thought of that. So I think that you all do really great engagement, and I think that I just wanted to share some props for you all. And it's not just the volunteer constructs that you build and execute; it's also the experiential, the communications, and I would imagine you could actually be a lot more successful fundraising because of your expertise in these other areas, not knowing at all how well you all fundraise, but just thinking about your engagement expertise and what you all do really well. So just wanted to mention that.
The helpline is a very important resource that I did not mean to miss mentioning, but yes, and we have a treasure trove of resources on our website that we do push out. We do have email communications, news. We have multiple newsletters, so we are engaging folks kind of in just many different ways.
Small and mighty for sure. Let's talk a little bit more about the scaling of volunteerism. This is definitely in your wheelhouse, and you talked about some of those micro volunteerism opportunities. How do you all make people feel that those types of experiences are really meaningful? How do you recognize them and their impact?
Interesting that you bring up recognition because we are currently in the process of taking a look at volunteer recognition at AFTD. We have a newly formed volunteer engagement advisory committee that is made up of our volunteers and some staff members that come together quarterly to work and discuss on things like that. So recognition is something we are literally currently looking at. Historically, the way that we've recognized our volunteers is through a variety of different ways, mostly staying in touch with them, of course, via email or the phone, making sure they understand that they're supported and that we really appreciate what they're doing for us. Every year in April, there's a volunteer appreciation week that we honor and celebrate and send out uh, personalized note cards and little trinkets sometimes, or historically we have sent out little trinkets. We are learning that that is potentially not the way that volunteers would like to most be recognized. It's really the personal connection and touches of doing outreach to them periodically, maybe every 6 months or even every year, personal notes, personal phone calls, personal emails. So we're taking a look at that. We also we recognize them as well on social media. So we post a lot of video footage, oftentimes asking them sort of like, why do you volunteer with AFTD? And then we post that and write very meaningful thanks to them for everything that they're doing. We also have a video that we show every year at our education conference. So our education conference is actually coming up in just 2 weeks. And during the plenary sessions, we will have a volunteer appreciation video that we will show that will summarize all of the ways that our volunteers have had an impact in the last year. We're learning and that is the way that people feel most recognized when they can see what kind of impact their involvement has had. So that's something that, again, we're looking at. We're trying to standardize it a little bit more across the organization with a baseline of recognition, with the option for certain staff leads that lead the different types of volunteers across the org to have the flexibility maybe to do something extra to recognize. We also do send we recognize their anniversary. So with us. So if the first date that they volunteered and then a year beyond that, they will receive, again, a special handwritten note mailed out to them to thank them.
Are volunteers involved in helping to plan the conference as well?
So we do have a few members of our Persons with FTD council. We have a council made up of the folks that have been diagnosed with FTD,
Yeah.
and they are involved with the session planning. We also poll our ambassadors and support group volunteers every year to ask if they have any ideas for sessions or speakers, et cetera. So they are involved in many ways, and they are also usually featured as speakers themselves at the conference. So we do try to pull from the community to put community members up on the stage so that the community members in the audience kind of have that peer-to-peer interaction.
When I think about my mom after her diagnosis, she was in no position to be a volunteer. I'd imagine that individuals who are tested and then are serving as volunteers in the type of capacity, it's really been right after diagnosis, and maybe they have family history so that they are they've been more proactive in genetic testing to figure out if they have those markers. Talk a little bit about those people, those volunteers. It seems like a really important group, but maybe one that's kind of tricky to manage.
Our opportunities are sometimes slightly adjusted based on the opportunity that they'd like to pursue, so that we're mindful, and we have support for them. So typically, we would send another volunteer with them if they were doing an information table with us. Then they'd have the
Yeah.
support of someone else there.
Yeah.
We've had some and you're right, it is mostly, I would say, we will hear from folks saying, "I was recently diagnosed with FTD and I'd like to get involved." But we have some volunteers that are living with FTD that, it's maybe been 3, 4 years, and it's a progressive disease, and of course, it's a varied progression, right, depending on the person. So I think maybe in some ways we've just, we've been able to find some volunteers that are still wanting to be and able to be fairly active in the activities that we have for them. But of
Yeah.
course, there are other people that have been diagnosed with FTD that maybe it's their care partner that becomes the primary volunteer, but they are still there's a lot of partnerships that happen where they're kind of, tag teaming it, doing it together as a couple or a unit if it's a parent child.
Yeah. That now that I'm thinking back on it, it was probably 3 or 4 years after what would have been a diagnosis if she had gone to see someone when her behavior first started to
Mhm.
change, before she was no longer really in a position to be an effective volunteer. So that makes sense. One other aspect of volunteerism I wanted to mention or ask about was getting individuals to participate in studies, because I have to imagine that part of your work as an organization involves ensuring the most up-to-date research, the most proactive filtering or moving of individuals into those studies that are active so that we can eventually find a cure. Just reflect on about the work that goes into getting folks who have been diagnosed or pre-diagnosis into those volunteer-based studies.
Yes, my colleague, Dr. Shayna Dodge, works very closely with our volunteers around research opportunities and research engagement. So if there are folks that are looking specifically to get more involved with that, or if there are biopharma companies that are, currently have clinical trials, early phase clinical trials that are looking for the lived experience perspective, they will often approach us. We will then Shana will work within our volunteer network to find folks for the biopharma companies to meet with and talk with. We also have an FTD disorders registry. So that's probably our biggest way that members of the community can get involved with research would be to sign up for the registry. And you have there are two options. You can sign up just to receive communications from the registry, or you can enroll in the registry itself, which we would highly encourage folks to do because for all the reasons you just laid out. So that's our
Yeah.
number one way for folks to get involved. But then we also have, Shayna working diligently with all of our biopharma companies and making sure that the lived experience is top of mind and part of any clinical trial that is occurring.
Tell listeners about your favorite volunteer success story. I imagine when you think about your work, individuals come to mind and have made a profound impact on you and your work. Just what's one that pops into your mind as far as that idea of volunteer engagement and success?
And I knew this was going to be a hard one though, because it's so hard to just narrow it down to one. And have to be sensitive around making sure all of our volunteers feel that all of the work that they're doing is equally important, which is 100% true. And my day-to-day work typically will fall into the political legislative advocacy side. So I think many of my personal experiences here at AFTD have been related to those volunteers that are actively working in that area. And so, I mean, one story I just got back from DC. So I'm just
Yeah.
thinking, we had a couple of volunteers. We did our first ever congressional briefing. So we had a panel of wonderful panelists, one of which is diagnosed with FTD. And she also went and did Hill visits. And so we all met members of Congress to increase again awareness of FTD, but we had some specific asks around legislation. She is like just a powerhouse of a person. And it's so, I hate to use the word fun, but it's so fun to watch, people who maybe have never done advocacy before, that type of work. And then just to see them sort of open up when they realize, oh, it's just having a conversation and sharing my personal story, but it's so impactful. So that's just one. But I also wanted to say something that I'm just really proud of here at AFTD is that when I started, we weren't doing Awareness Week resolutions or proclamations. And those are something that is somewhat of a light lift. Certainly, proclamations are lighter than resolutions. Proclamations, you go onto your governor's website, you fill out a form, and that state or city or town will proclaim our Awareness Week as, FTD Awareness Week. A resolution does have to go through the state legislative process. So it's an actual bill that's introduced and it goes through all of the process. So something that's been very exciting to watch that I think is a success story, of course, is that we started at zero. Right when we started, we had nobody proclaiming or having a resolution in their states. We are up to 36 states that have now recognized FTD Awareness Week in their state, whether through a proclamation or a resolution. Our goal is to get to 50. And so we keep working at that. And it's been pretty cool to watch the progression over time to see, we started at zero, and the first year we got 4 resolutions. The next year we got, 11 resolutions. And now like we keep building and building and building. So, that is all volunteers. Like the volunteers do it themselves. We just provide them a template and support that they need to get started, and then they are the ones building the relationships at their state level or city or town, and they do all the work, and it's very cool to watch.
It is very cool to watch. I imagine there's a lot of effort made on your part and those of your colleagues to help volunteers feel comfortable being advocates. You just mentioned a pretty stressful type of advocacy where you're presenting on Capitol Hill, interacting with policymakers and their staffs. That's got to be maybe one of the more stressful volunteer type of advocacy work that you do, and you just shared another type. But how do you make people feel comfortable stepping into some of those more stressful roles or just advocacy roles in general?
We have trainings. We've done live trainings. We've done live webinar trainings for folks. We've also had just sort of drop-in groups, like come and see us if you have questions. We're happy to answer them. We have new training videos that we have just started in the calendar year, and we're posting them on our Action Center online. So our Action Center is where all of our advocacy work can be found, and templates and support. And then primarily, I mean, we have a small team, but we are here all the time to answer any of the questions that anybody has. So we try to oftentimes promote our advocacy at the AFTD.org email address. So that goes to the full team and people can chime in as they can. One of my colleagues, Lauren Palea, is our advocacy coordinator, and she works very closely with folks specifically around resolutions and proclamations to help walk them through everything. And then I think I already mentioned we do have templates or toolkits. I called them templates perhaps, but toolkits that are on our website to walk you through all of that. And then we're continuing to add to our library of videos so that and have more sort of informal opportunities for folks to reach us via Zoom to ask questions, and we can, help train them and support them through some of these more stressful things that we're asking them to do.
Have you noticed a personality trait difference between those who become advocates from maybe early lightweight volunteer opportunities? What do you see as a main difference in someone who becomes successful as an advocate?
They're Well, I mean, everyone's passionate. All of our volunteers are
Yeah.
passionate. I would say maybe they're just a little more willing to speak.
Hmm.
They're not embarrassed or shy to speak up and out about things that they're feeling passionately about. And they enjoy it. They enjoy going and meeting with folks. I think they feel that the difference that they're making. And I think the people that haven't quite gotten there yet oftentimes may feel, well, what is my one voice going to do? Right.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and it is, but it's impactful. Your voice has power, and then really we're looking for collective voices. So, we are so much stronger together. So we do need more people to be willing. And they don't have to be the ones that go to Capitol Hill. I mean, those are probably people that really are comfortable putting themselves out there. But again, they can be sending emails for sure to their legislators, which is just as powerful, I think, because the more people that they hear from about a particular issue, the more that they're going to pay attention.
I imagine there's a lot of, I'm going to call it noise because it's not a particularly kind word to think about advocacy work, and then communications directed at Congress people. You have to. I would imagine all these nonprofits, all these causes have advocacy happening in Capitol Hill. What have you noticed about what seems to capture the attention of the people who you're intending to reach? Separate and aside is the fact we currently have a Congress that, for a long time really has struggled to pass meaningful legislation and take up some of these causes that you would imagine a normally function Congress would, right? That would be more responsive to the advocacy work. But talk about a little bit maybe about how you coach your advocates, your volunteers to work through the noise, to stay focused in the ecosystem that probably has a ton of other people doing similar work.
Yes, you are correct. Certainly at the federal level, they are constantly meeting with different groups about many different disease areas. And that's just disease advocacy. Then there's all the
Yeah.
other types of advocacy that
All
they're
the other
meeting
types,
about.
environmental,
Yes, yes.
guns. I mean, just oil, gas. I mean, we could just rattle off a ton of
Yeah.
areas to be an advocate. If it's meaningful to you.
Right. So, the coaching and the tactics or strategies that we as an organization also take at the staff level is really around relationship building. So it's not ultimately sending the emails is great when we're working on a piece of legislation that we want to pass, because then if they get a lot about the same bill, and a lot of the bills that we support are not just supported by the FTD community. So, they're neurodegenerative at large, or they're Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. So there are larger groups of people by the numbers writing in about the same things, which is great because, like, all whatever that saying is about ships and tides. I get it wrong every time, but and so that is helpful, but it is persistence. So and patience. So federal legislation, as you've already stated, does not work very quickly, and so you do have to be patient. I was just speaking with a colleague, and he was saying that he worked on an issue for 11 years. Like, it's a long-term game here. And you kind of chip away at the iceberg over time through the persistent communication and outreach that you do to build a relationship with that office. And oftentimes, what you'll find, and we have found this recently, you will find people that actually have heard of FTD and, in fact, have a personal connection to it on the Hill. And so what that does is creates what we call a champion, right? We've maybe located a potential champion of FTD issues on the Hill, and that's going to make all the difference. That's going to cut through the noise.
Yeah.
We oftentimes also tell folks, never discount the staffer, because you're going to meet with the staffer. You're not going to meet with the member themselves, but that staffer holds so much power. So if you can build a relationship with the staff member, they can become your sort of internal advocate in that office, and they can advocate to their boss. This is important, and here's why. So it's a slow burn. We work at it over time. It is all about relationship building. And within that relationship building, it's really about sharing your story, your personal journey, your personal story with FTD, and making that person understand, like, there are problems, but maybe we can work together, to fix those problems. So it is, we're only 2.5 years into this type of work. And so I think we'll see more, hopefully more growth over time, as we get more advocates. We need more people, right? We need more people speaking to and building relationships. It can't just be, a handful of us. We have to kind of come at it from all different sides. So we have what we call our grassroots advocates, right? Those are the people on the ground. Those are the people we turn to activate and mobilize. We have our staff that works with a lobbying firm in DC, and we then have meetings with folks on the Hill to create that awareness of AFTD and FTD. And then, of course, we have all of our state work. So it's almost like a three-prong approach to try to do this work.
What's the outcome you all are looking to influence? What would be ultimate success of the advocacy work you're doing?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we do have our policy priorities that we do every Congress. So every 2 years is kind of our guiding light of what we're working on, what we're asking for. Currently, our sort of like our 4 buckets, I guess, if you are, pillars of our policy priorities, which won't change over time at all, most likely, are research and innovation, awareness, caregiving supports, and access to care and
Yeah.
services.
Well, to that question, I suppose one of the reasons I asked is personal. And right now, if you were to get a genetic testing to find out you have the markers for FTD and other types of diseases, you cannot get long-term care insurance. So you cannot, and even if you tell your doctor, I'm experiencing memory loss, or I'm experiencing these behavioral changes, your insurers can get those insights if they're written in your medical records, and you cannot get insurance, right? So,
Yes. Yep.
I mean, these are huge that no one knows that, right? And you might be inclined to get your genetic testing done early in your life to say, like, okay, well, I know I'm going to likely be facing this particular illness later on, and not having done your due diligence early enough to recognize that you better secure your long-term care insurance first, and make the other arrangements, before you have those uh, tests reveal your genetic likelihood. Most people didn't know that. I didn't know that before I started looking into it. That would be one area of advocacy I would love to see you all continue to push on.
Yeah, and we are supportive.
Yeah.
There are state bills, so this is more of on the state side, state initiative. At the federal level, it's GINA. It is not it's not the perfect solution, though, of course. So that's why the state bills are coming forward to provide those protections. So anti-discrimination bills around genetic information. And there's one currently being considered in California, and AFTD has, signed on for support and is working on that. And then I know that there are others across the states, and I think we're going to see more and more. And I think it's really something that we will be taking a more active role in as we continue to get settled. My state advocacy manager only just started in October, so
Okay.
she's getting her
You're
feet
still
wet
building.
still.
You're still
We're
getting.
still building.
Yeah. When you've come a long way, right? Over the last 20 years, and it's exciting to see. Well, originally, this was called Pick's disease. It was something totally different as far as a branding perspective, right? And that's
Mhm.
all changed over the more recent decades. All right, Megan, a couple of quick fire questions here before I let you go. I really appreciate your time. Tell me about a powerful moment you've seen in your work.
Did it quick fire. Let me
Yeah.
think.
I suppose that's not exactly a quick fire question, is it?
Mm. Oh my gosh, my brain is a blank canvas right now.
That's okay.
Um,
Tell me the best advice you've ever received with respect to how to do your job.
to do my job. I think the best advice would be mostly around leading a team. So making sure that you really are a leader and not just a manager. And I've always taken that to heart and tried to really put that into practice, and build an environment in which the entire team feels supported, as well as, there's mutual respect on all sides, and that we're really working all together towards the same mission.
Perfect. All right. Always my last question. Where do you find inspiration? A book, a movie, a podcast, recipe, could be anything, could be personal or professional. What's something that helps you find inspiration?
Know if this is exactly what you're looking for, but I do follow a lot of food bloggers on Instagram, and I I find lots of inspiration for recipes through them and scour them all the time to figure out my weekly dinners, etc., for the family. So I
Who's your
probably
fave?
find the most. Who or what? Would
Uh,
you?
who is the author of the blog that you lean
Oh,
on the most
oh,
for
the
your,
most.
yeah.
That's another hard one because there are 3. There are 3
Okay.
that I specifically rotate through: the Real Food Dietitians, Mary's Whole Life, who is completely gluten-free, as well as Erin Lives Whole. So those are my 3 go-tos, and they're great for anytime I have an event too that I have to take an appetizer to. I always go to their blogs and their websites to find out, what am I taking?
Perfect. That's great. Those sound like very healthy resources. My wife and I sometimes check out one called Half Baked Harvest, I want to say, and it's
Yes,
been
I
around
know
a
that
long time,
one.
but I would say
Yeah.
it's a lot of comfort food. It's
Yes.
it's a lot of cream sauces and stuff that may not be as healthy as some of the stuff that you're
But
that you're bringing.
tasty.
Very, very tasty. Meghan Buzby, thank you so much for sharing your work and your world. And I learned a lot, and I continue to be supportive of your organization, the Association of Frontotemporal Dementia. Everybody should check out their website. If you're in higher ed, I hope you took some notes because the things that Megan and her team are doing there are small but mighty. But I think that the fact that you all don't have some of the traditional structures that would and to sort of point you towards doing lots of events all over the country and instead lean on digital means and scaling volunteerism, I think is the direction higher ed is moving towards. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the program. So thanks again for your time. It was great to see you, and it's been a joy to meet you and get to know your work.
Thank you so much, Ryan.